All right, well, welcome back. I feel like I'm talking to the three healthiest people probably in this office, uh, but we're here talking about it, so that's good. So last week we talked about heart disease, we talked about stress, we talked about metabolic syndrome. Now today we're going to talk about diabetes, obesity, and nutrition. And if you remember from last week, those are major risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So this topic actually works perfectly with that. And actually in general with health, everything interrelates. And so we're going to see that today. But first of all, how was your health this week? So, especially related to the stress reduction aspect, was there anything that you have to share about that for the past week?
I went into it thinking that I was going to get more rest and, mostly the sleep side of things,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm one of those people that once I sit down, I'm out. So
Okay.
I usually am buzzing around until bedtime. But this week we're actually down 3 people in my group, so it's been 14 plus hour days. And then you get home and you're like a zombie, but you still have stuff to do and all that. So I have not even been able to make any
Okay.
strides towards that at all.
So life happened, life
Yeah.
got in the way,
But
and the
there's light at
rest.
the end of the tunnel. We were just talking about we hired some people, and I'm going to have, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'll have some relief on that.
Okay, perfect. And we did talk about that last week. Life gets in the way sometimes. And that's when we double up on the stress reduction and then make sure that when life starts to get a little less hectic, we increase our rest to make sure we recover from that. But yeah, thanks for your honesty. Those things happen.
I had a pretty good healthy week. Been eating good. Maintaining control on the stress thing. Got up camp now last weekend, which is beautiful for me.
Oh, great.
Did a lot of hiking and camping. Found 3 sheds in one weekend, which is like phenomenal. Never even thought that would happen, but that was very cool. The only thing that I really didn't do this week is I didn't keep the exercise regimen during the week, and I don't know what that's a combination of. The discipline, the lack of discipline, and the lack of regimen snuck in on me again this week, and I think it's just the life happening type of thing again. Doesn't mean I'm going to stay there. I recognize that it happened, and I was just a little disappointed because after last week, what I wanted to do was write a rigid schedule, and I'm on a pretty steady schedule, but it's not the schedule I want to be on.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I missed probably 3 of my days of exercise, but I did a lot of hiking, did a lot of work around the house type stuff. I don't know if it kind of qualifies, or it's in my mind it doesn't really take the place of the exercise I want to do, but it's not like I was lethargic or anything, laying in front of TV or nothing like
Yeah,
that.
so you do want to look at the positive. 3 days of not doing it was 4 days that you did.
Yeah.
And I think the awareness is great. That the awareness that, okay, I didn't do what I wanted to, and acknowledging that, and then, like you said, coming up with a rigid schedule, something that maybe is, when you know the schedule, it's harder to get out of it.
Yeah.
So perfect. Yeah, the action step, and you do have some accomplishment under your belt. So perfect. Chris, what did you do healthy this past week?
My workout regimen's actually been pretty good lately. But like Jeff was saying, I go until I hit my bed. But when I do, my brain doesn't stop. I have a little bit of like nighttime and early morning anxiety kind of thing. That it's like all the things that I can't control. I'm usually good about not worrying about it. But usually like 2 or 3 nights a week where I'll just stay up and you just can't get rid of it.
Oh, I wish you were here last week.
Oh, I know. So like I was telling some guy downstairs earlier, there's at least one night a week where I think I wake up every half hour, 45 minutes.
With the mind going?
Oh yeah. Yep, I'll fall asleep for 45 minutes, wake up, then the next night I'll be out the whole night. Last night I think I stared at the ceiling for an hour and a half. Then woke up 2 hours later and then stared at the ceiling for 2 hours and then had to get up for 2 hours. Yeah. So I'll go through that.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced that. It's definitely not fun.
And it doesn't happen. It's not every night, which is good. But I think it's better when the workouts are a little bit more strenuous.
Okay. So that's good to know. That's good piece of awareness. So the thing that I wanted to do was to do deep breaths before I go to bed. And so I will tell you, one of the biggest differences I see when I do that is I actually dream more. And for me, that means I'm sleeping deeper. And so taking 5 to 15 minutes of just taking some deep breaths really does a great thing for me. And that's one of the things we talked about with the stress reduction is finding certain times throughout the day. 15 minutes, I would say, would be a good minimum. And if you do it 5 minutes morning, 5 minutes lunch, 5 minutes before bed, you get your 15 minutes right there, and it becomes a habit. And for me, it helps me sleep a lot better. So that's one thing to consider.
I do the actual like the hypnosis and meditation stuff. That helps.
Like the guided self-hypnosis.
But yeah, there's just some nights where it's so bad.
Some nights.
It's like I don't even hear it. So.
Do you ever keep like a journal or something next to you?
Just got the thought to paper and
Yeah. Because sometimes that's good. I mean, I've woken up sometimes with anxiety, remembering that I had to pay a bill or something the next day and I had forgotten. And so, like, in that case, that's a good thing because it woke me up to tell me of something I needed to do. But when it keeps going, then it becomes an issue. Sometimes by putting it down on paper, the brain feels better, sometimes not.
Yeah.
I've tried doing something like that, like writing everything that I wanted to accomplish the day before, like the night before, or usually try to get back to the next day.
Yeah.
Just to kind of outline the structure of what's going to happen. Like you said, it's like you just shutting it off and not caring because there's a lot of times where I carry that to work.
Yeah. Our brain has enough to think about, and it tires it, it taxes it.
It stresses you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to get to especially meditation, but a little bit of the stress reduction again in week 5, because it really is important. It's something that a lot of times that we may forget about and neglect, so we're going to talk about it then because it actually plays together very well with aging. But today, we're going to get more into the nutrition side, and we're going to start with diabetes and obesity. So what is diabetes? It basically stems from an issue with the body in regulating blood sugar. The blood sugar is too high. It's too high in the morning. It stays high after we eat, and basically we just have too much blood or too much sugar floating around in the blood, and that has a lot of problems. Some of the issues: sugar is very inflammatory, and so it creates an immune response. It creates inflammation, which over time causes damage. Another thing is sugar is very sticky. It's a very sticky molecule, which means it starts to attach to other molecules and structures. It's called glycosylation. And so one way that they measure your average glucose content in your blood is to measure your glycosylated hemoglobin. So how much hemoglobin has glucose attached to it. The more you have, the higher your blood sugar is on average. And so that's a good way to track diabetes. Now what happens is when the glucose is attaching to all these structures, it can affect how they function. Now one of those is the insulin receptor. And so the insulin receptor is what allows sugar to get into the cells. So when you have sugar in your blood, insulin's released, it attaches to the receptor, and then that receptor tells the cell to start taking in glucose. Without insulin binding to the receptor, the glucose cannot make it into the cell. And so where does it stay? In the blood. And so if you have glucose attaching to the receptors, insulin can't attach to the receptor now, and so insulin isn't working. And that's what's called insulin resistance. You have insulin in your body, but the cells are resistant to it. They can't respond to it, and a lot of times that's because the glucose is attaching. And so as you can see, it becomes a vicious cycle. You have increased blood sugar, which makes it harder for insulin to work, which increases blood sugar even more. And so with those people, they have issues with any amount of blood sugar and any sort of sugary product. They don't process it the way people with average insulin responses do. And so it becomes that out of control response. Now you have 2 types of diabetes, and they're also adding a third. But basically, we'll talk about the first 2 types. Type 1 is considered to be the juvenile onset, even though this isn't always accurate, but it's generally going to be younger people that develop this. That's when they're diagnosed. They're usually going to have, they're going to be thinner, and this is an autoimmune reaction against their pancreas. So the pancreas makes insulin, and if you're killing the pancreas can't make insulin. And so this is a true insulin deficiency diabetes. And now for this one, obviously the treatment's much different. For this one, it's protect the remaining cells, pancreas cells, by keeping the autoimmune process at bay. But in this case, supplementing and getting insulin shots makes sense because the body just can't make enough. Now, most people have the type 2 diabetes, and that's considered the adult onset diabetes. But again, now we're seeing this more and more even in kids. And so the juvenile versus adult onset is no longer really a good and accurate way to describe these. The type 2 diabetes, this is the insulin resistant type that we talked about. Blood sugar is high over time, usually poor diet, poor lifestyle, and then that causes issues in the body, and the physiology changes where now it can't even process sugar the way it's supposed to. And now the blood sugar just stays high over time. Now this is the one, type 2 this is the one where we can prevent this one. And so this is where most of the focus is for today. So let's take a little bit of a look at diabetes. We did have a speech on this, so we're going to move through this pretty quickly. Give you some of the main points. 5,000 people a day in the U.S. will be diagnosed with diabetes. 5,000 people a day. Nearly 30 million people have diabetes, and almost 90 million have pre-diabetes. So we have over 100 million people in a country of about 300 million that have sugar dysregulation in the blood. It's a lot of people. Diabetes and pre-diabetes cost America $322 billion per year, which is an unfathomable number. 1 in 5 healthcare dollars are spent on diabetes care, and 1 in 3 Medicare dollars. And for people diagnosed with diabetes, their healthcare costs are 2.3 times that of people without diabetes. And so beyond even the health burden, which there is a significant one, and a quality of life burden, there's also a significant financial burden, both within the individual and collectively. This is a serious problem, and it's one of the leading causes of death. Looking at a few more facts, so over $10,000 more were spent with people with diabetes. And then insulin is rising, the price of insulin is rising, and then the out-of-pocket healthcare costs, which we talked about, 2.5 times more. And so the problem's getting worse, not better. Per year, yes. So some of the symptoms of type 2 diabetes: excessive thirst. You always feel like you're thirsty. Excessive urination, going to the bathroom a lot. And that has to do with the effect on the kidneys with diabetes. Fatigue, slow healing wounds, that's a big one. Not being able to, the body can't repair as well. Vision loss, that's when it starts to get bad. Diabetes, when you have a lot of blood sugar, and it starts to attack things, it attacks the small vessels and the nerves. And that's where you see a lot of damage. So in the eyes, you have a lot of tiny vessels. And when those are damaged, it affects the vision. Numbness, tingling, or prickly pain in the feet, that's getting to the nerves now in the feet. And showing basically that the disease process is advancing. And some people, especially men, have the tendency to kind of brush these off. Oh, I'm just getting older, that's why my vision's going. Oh, I just have some weird stuff in my feet. Sometimes it gets better.
I was going to ask that because I am at an age and my vision is getting worse. And there are mornings where I get out and it takes, 2 or 3 minutes to walk around the room before, I feel that like that.
So those could be signs. The tough thing about medicine, and especially diabetes, but disease in general, is these can be a lot of different things that are causing it. And so a good way to see where you're at is to get a screening. Get your fasting blood sugar, and then even if you want to be sure, get that hemoglobin A1C, and that's the glycosylated. Fasting for the glucose, the hemoglobin A1C, doesn't have to be fasting, but generally you're going to be taking them at the same time. Yeah, it's a blood test, and they can do it at the same time. Perfect. Yeah, because vision loss can be getting older. I mean, that's something that happens.
And we call that hemoglobin A1C.
A1C, yep. Obesity is a major risk factor of diabetes. And as you can see, from 1960 to the present, it has gone from 1 in 10 people to 1 in 3 people. And they're projected in the next 15 years, there'll be 1 in 2 people. That is absolutely scary.
Wow.
Yeah. And it makes sense. If you look at pictures of people 50 years ago, any black and white photo, nobody's overweight. And those same people now, if they're living, are overweight, and so are their kids and their grandkids. Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of changes that have not been for the good, and we see what happens. It's now the norm to at least have a little bit of belly fat, be a little bit overweight. That is the norm now. And now it's becoming increasingly normal where it's going to be 1 in 2 people are actually obese. Not even just a little bit overweight, they are obese. So that's scary and very sobering. Again, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but this helps all of us on some level just stay healthy. One of the main indicators, this is how they measure whether someone's normal weight, underweight, overweight, and obese, is the BMI. That's more or less the gold standard. And so if you're below 18.5, you're underweight. If you're between 18.5 and basically 25, that's normal. Between 25 and 30, that's overweight, and over 30, that's obese. And I have a little calculator here. Very easy to find BMI calculator. You don't need much information to get it. Now, there are some drawbacks. It's actually something I don't really particularly use. So what are some drawbacks? Anyone?
I remember I did a calculation, this was probably 6-7 years ago, and I actually purposely bulked up quite a bit. So I was walking around like 250 at my height, and when you did the calculation, I was borderline obese. But it was skewed.
So why do you say it's skewed?
Because I was fit, and I was heavier from the muscle.
Yeah. So people with a lot of muscle weighs, it actually weighs more than fat. And so if you just look at the height to weight ratio, it's going to be skewed.
Oh, sorry.
That's one of the main ones, right? And even if someone has a normal BMI, they may not have any fitness. They may be skinny, but they may not have any strength, no endurance, no cardiovascular health. And so just because your normal BMI does not mean you're healthy. Yeah. And there's some studies that are coming up that shows a little bit of fat is actually a good thing as long as you're fit. It's better to be fat and fit than it is to be skinny and unfit. And so it really doesn't tell the full story. And a lot of times you can tell just by looking at someone and getting their history whether they are on the fit side or not, and whether they're overweight or not. And so not incredibly helpful, but when it comes to doing studies, it's good to have numbers and to be able to put people in some sort of category. But if you do test your BMI and it's higher than what you think is accurate, or if you're very strong and you get obese, don't take it to heart, basically. Diabetes risk factors. So again, like last time, we're going to separate between certain disease states that can predispose you, lifestyle factors that can predispose, and then other factors that are generally out of our control. And so disease conditions for diabetes, obviously if you have prediabetes, you're getting on that roller coaster. That process is beginning where your body is not handling glucose as well as it should, and so it just makes it even harder down the road. Insulin resistance, again, that's part of that process. High blood pressure, low HDL, and high triglycerides. Now, we've seen very similar risk factors last week, didn't we, with the cardiovascular disease. And again, these are very linked. Diabetes is part of metabolic syndrome. That is one of the main things that is affecting people today. And luckily, it responds very well to diet and exercise and lifestyle. And that's why we're here today. So lifestyle issues, being overweight and obese, obviously, that's a major factor in diabetes. A diet high in sugar should make sense. But yes, if you're having diet high in sugar or things that turn into sugar very easily, Those are two things that's going to make it more sugar in the blood, tougher for the body to process all of it. It's like if you're working, you get a whole bunch of work piled on your desk. It's just going to get harder and harder to keep up with it. And then a sedentary lifestyle. If you're not exercising, exercise is one thing that really primes the body to accept insulin and then accept blood sugar. It helps decrease insulin resistance and a host of all other factors that we'll get to next week. But exercise is one of the best ways to get your body processing sugar better. Other factors, now these are the ones that you can't really do much about. Ethnic background, African Americans tend to get diabetes, a very prevalent rate of diabetes. Age over 45, as we get older, our health tends to deteriorate, especially if we aren't keeping up with the lifestyle over time. And so some of these age factors, part of it is just kind of health and disease catching up with some of our bad decisions. I think we can stay healthy throughout our life. And then family history. If you have a family history, it may be genetic part of it, but also some of it is also habits. If you grow up with a certain way of living, and you start to adopt these lifestyles, adopt the food choices, then you'll probably suffer the same fate as your other family members, right? So some of it's genetics, and if it's genetics, not much you can do about that. But there's other factors too. And so that's one of the important things is if you do have risk factors for diabetes, be aware of that because it's something that you need to be aware of. But there are a lot of things you can do. So take a few moments to fill out questions number 1 and 2 on the handout that basically go into what are some of your personal risk factors. So again, the risk factors are there to let you know where you stand and what your chances are of developing it. The ones that you have that are part of you, just use the ones that you can control to mitigate those factors because it's never going to be a factor of 0. You always have some risk. And it's mainly about decreasing as much as you can. Okay, so now what we're talking about risk factors, weight. Weight's a big one. And so what is the relationship between weight and blood sugar? Because what we've seen clinically, and there's a lot of agreement around this, is that weight, if you want to control your weight, look at the sugars and look at the carbs. And so what is that connection? So nutrition, what you're getting in your body plays a major role in this. And it's both the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, but also the macronutrients, which are your proteins, carbs, fats. The body has a pathway where it processes carbohydrates to make energy. It's a very important pathway. Not only does it produce energy for us, but it also serves as an attachment point for other pathways that make other cellular components, that can make amino acids, that can make fats. Now this has a very important consequence. If your body gets a lot of sugar all at once, it cannot process all of it to make energy at that time. And so it becomes a two-way street. There's a fork in the road. One way it can make energy. When that way is blocked, it goes the other way, which is into fat production. And so people that eat a lot of sugar, they can't process all of it into energy. So now it's stored as fat. And actually, insulin is our primary storage hormone. It tells our body to make more fat. It tells our body to make more cholesterol. And so people that are eating a lot of these simple carbs and sugars, that's where they come in, and their triglycerides are high, and their cholesterol is high. And now for years, it's been, we'll stop eating fat, stop eating cholesterol. But that's very short-sighted. They miss the biochemistry portion of what the body's doing on the inside. Now, one factor in this is that the type of sugar you eat is important too. Glucose, which is commonly seen, it's going to be seen in your complex carbohydrates. Those are broken down to glucose. And it is a major component of a lot of fruits. That actually there's a step in the process where it's regulated. And it can kind of stop. Say, okay, slow down. We're trying to process all this other glucose to make energy. So slow down so we can take care of this. And that changes how much is turned into fat, decreases it. That's a good thing. Fructose, on the other hand, it enters the pathway afterwards. And so fructose is unregulated. And it's mainly processed in the liver. And so if you have a lot of fructose, like high fructose corn syrup, the liver is just, I can't process all of this. So let's just make it all into fats. And so fructose, more than glucose even, turns into fat. And that's why things like high fructose corn syrup, even agave is knocked because that has a lot of fructose. It's knocked as too much fructose, the body can't handle it, it's going to be stored as fat. And that's from basic biochemistry. Now the one thing is, you may say, well, what about fruits? Fruits have fructose in them. Some of them have quite a bit of fructose. That's a good point. That's why people that have blood sugar regulation issues should not be eating a lot of fruits. General recommendations, 1 serving of fruit per day. The lower the glycemic index, the better. Glycemic index is how much it raises the blood sugar when you eat it. Berries are going to be one of their best options. If you have a blood sugar issue, berries. They're not going to raise the blood sugar that much. A lot of antioxidants, not much fructose. But the good thing about fruit is even though it does have fructose, it has a lot of fiber. And that will help slow down digestion, slow down the rate at which sugar goes into the blood, so it gives your body time to catch up. Fruit juices and sweetened juices, sodas, those are the absolute worst. Going right into the bloodstream, no warning, no way to buffer it. It's just going to spike it right away. Some nutrients that are good for blood sugar regulation. Any that you know about? There's a lot of them.
What's the question again?
Nutrients, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals that help with blood sugar regulation. Chromium's one. Chromium and vanadium, 2 minerals. Those are really good with blood sugar regulation. Chromium's one of the more well-known one. Omega fatty acids, those are good too. In general, fats and proteins, especially in the diet with the food, will help slow down the process of absorbing the sugar. And of course, fiber is really good.
Is that like even an omega red, omega day, like a fish oil pill or something like that?
Yeah, fish oil can definitely help with blood sugar
I've been
issues.
doing that for like 2 years. It helps make me feel better.
Yeah.
It makes me feel a little flexible too. I mean, I don't know if it actually serves as an oil. But yeah, it makes me feel, I don't know what to say, not stiff.
Well, it does decrease inflammation, so that definitely could be the mechanism. But when we get inflammation and swelling into a joint, that leads to stiffness, and it can lead to pain too. And usually in that case, it feels better after you move around a little bit, and that's because you're kind of moving the inflammatory products and moving the swelling around. So that could be how it's helping.
I had an issue where, like I said, I'm out in the woods a lot. I used to collect my own firewood and stuff, and the loggers go through it in their forest, and I take trailers and I get firewood for my camp, and I bring it down here to burn.
Oh, great.
So I was throwing logs on my trailer one weekend, and I hurt my shoulder. I mean, I was a framer when I was younger, and I used to run with lumber on my shoulder all the time. but I hurt my shoulder and it hasn't been right since, you know, so I went to physical therapist for probably 3 months, 4 months, and he's got me using split bangs and doing all these different range of motions and through my shoulder. And eating those omega ribs really helped that. You know, as well.
Right.
So, I mean, I was doing that ibuprofen for the inflammation and
Right.
with the sugar and the triglycerides
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So
Great for the cardiovascular system in general. Most systems, they benefit. Neurological system, which we'll talk about again on week 5. Excellent. No, that's great. Thank you. Activity level, like we talked about, exercise, both cardiovascular and strength, lead to lower blood sugar levels. Makes sense. Not only are you going to be using it, but it also sensitizes your body to insulin. It helps to balance that. There's an insulin cortisol ratio, and it helps to balance it out. We'll talk about cortisol very soon. Basal metabolism, obviously, people have different metabolic rates, and so some people, when they're at rest, they burn more than people that aren't at rest. And actually, your fitness level will determine, and the type of fitness and exercise that you take part in will determine whether you're going to burn sugar at rest or fat at rest. Some people burn around 70% fat and 30% glucose, where others burn up to 100% fat when they're at rest. And the good thing about burning fat is that you have basically an unlimited source of energy from fats. It takes a long time to burn through the fat stores. Whereas sugar and glycogen, which is how the body stores sugar, those can be depleted relatively quickly. And especially for anyone who's looking to lose weight or stay at a more fit level and change their body composition, being more of a fat burner is a great thing to be. And so we'll talk, I'll just mention basically a good way to do that is to train aerobically. Greater than 30 minutes in a session, aerobic, not super high intensity, but moderate intensity that you can sustain for 30 or more minutes. That's a great way to increase your aerobic capacity. And it's also been shown to increase basal metabolism. What's another way to increase basal metabolism on the diet side? Yeah, well, so certain foods that you eat will increase your metabolism for sure.
Spicy food.
What sort of dietary habits? What sort of things can crash the metabolism?
Sugar and fruit spike
starches too.
Some starches. Yeah, the food coma can definitely, you go on that roller coaster. Also, eating habits and timing. For people that go long periods of time, you know, if they don't eat for a while, they go on starvation diets, they're inconsistent, that can also affect metabolism. The prevailing, a lot of the opinions right now are that if you eat frequently throughout the day, that's better for your metabolism. I'm not sure if I ascribe to 6 meals a day. I think that might be a bit overkill. You want to give your gut rest at some point. But I do like the idea of consistency and having meals throughout the day and not going too long without eating, because then your body gets into the state where it doesn't know when it's getting its next meal. So what's it going to do? It's going to store it. It's going to put you in shutdown mode, slow you down to preserve resources, and then store it all as fat, because who knows when the next meal is coming. And so some people who are trying to lose weight, they actually cause themselves damage and makes it even harder to lose weight.
I'll try to find it. It's called, if it's on nutritional training. I don't know if you ever read, everybody should read it, it's funny about it. I don't know if you guys have ever talked about it. Like, there's sections on each goal. Like, whether it's, mental or physical and what kind of physical. And it's all about, like, what time you eat, how many grams of protein, these vitamins each day. It's really interesting, right? And how it basically fuels your body and makes it work at its peak performance.
Yeah.
Just by the timing of each certain type of nutrients.
Touch on that quickly in one of the chapters in the supplements guide. Like the break in small meals and what to mix, which carbs and proteins to mix, and what else is important.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I like to hear that.
Yeah, the talk of especially like as an office worker, between 1 and 2, that lunchtime, that crash, what
Yeah.
And that just boosts your brain and yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I would definitely like to look at it. I mean, it's a fascinating topic, really, and there's different thoughts, and
Oh, yeah.
sometimes they're on completely different ends of the spectrum. But because a lot of it comes down to your biochemical individuality,
Oh,
so
yeah.
what you respond to. But it's great to see how all these different theories play a role, because you have nutrient timing for exercise, when to get the nutrients in before and after based on your goals, not only to kind of get you in either the sugar burning phase or the fat burning phase, so what you eat before and during, but then how do you recover? What are you going to eat for recovery to replenish your stores, not only of glycogen, which is going to be your stored fuel, but also for muscle repair, especially if you're doing a lot of strength building or even a lot of endurance activities require a lot of muscle activity. And then different times of the day. And one of the things that I've read recently, which is interesting, was proposing you have dinner for breakfast and breakfast for dinner. And so a lot of your protein need to be in the morning because that will keep your energy, your blood sugar stable throughout the day. And then you have a lot of carbs at night, and that'll kind of store it more as the glycogen, which is that's your sugar storage, and so you store it that way instead of fat.
It helps you recover as you sleep.
Yeah, yeah, and it helps you. And think about it. If you have a lot of carbs, what happens? You usually get tired afterwards, right? What better time than at night when you want to be going to bed? And so, whereas other people say, if you get hungry at night, have a nice protein-rich snack. And so, it definitely does vary. But I do recommend for a lot of people, especially if they get tired in the afternoon, proteins and fats are going to be more of their friend than carbohydrates. You'll keep them constant, and it actually also helps with concentration. Now, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this. For me, if I skip a meal or I eat later or I start with carbs, the rest of the day I'm craving sugars, I'm craving more carbs. It just, right? I mean, it just kind of gets out of control. But with a good diet, consistent, getting good fats and proteins, then the craving isn't even there. It's more, the body's in a different state. So some of the hormones that play a role in weight management are the sex hormones, especially testosterone and estrogen. Estrogen is going to lead to more fat deposition. Testosterone, you're going to utilize more of that. And sometimes even the blood sugar can throw that off. Even thyroid hormone. This is mainly for females, but men can get hypothyroid as well. Thyroid is your main metabolic hormone. It's telling your body how much energy to produce, and this plays a major role in nutrition because if your body doesn't have the nutrients or the calories it needs, the thyroid gland is going to say, we don't have enough to support normal body activity. So we need to slow this person down. We need to make them tired. We need to slow down processes and reserve our energy. And so that's why it's really important to get in nutrients and why these starvation diets have the opposite effect. Because the thyroid knows. It sees it and slows the person down. And now their metabolic rate is lower and their desire to exercise is lower. Their energy is lower. Nothing's going right at this point. Cortisol and insulin, these are two major elements. So we talked about cortisol last week and its role in stress. And we also talked about how cortisol raises the blood sugar because what it wants to do is mobilize our resources to get us where that we can deal with this stressful scenario. It wakes us up, gets us alert, and it gets blood sugar in the blood. That way our cells can use it to make sure if we're in a fight or flight scenario, we can fight or flee that scenario. Now, so what happens is if the blood sugar crashes, especially if you're on one of these blood sugar rides, eating sugars and then insulin is released and then it crashes, cortisol is then released to bump it back up. Cortisol tells the liver and kidneys to make more sugar and put it into the blood because we need a healthy amount. Otherwise, our brain really suffers. Our brain runs primarily on glucose. Now, if you have cortisol that's being released just to keep the blood sugar consistent, and this is happening throughout the day later on in the day, what's that going to do to our overall cortisol response, our energy, and our health? It's obviously not going to be good, right? We're going to be less sensitive to cortisol because our body's seeing it too much. And if we're doing it late at night and we're crashing, but we need to be awake, like let's say in the afternoon, and then we get another spike late afternoon or evening may keep us up at night as well. But then if we're sleeping, that's where the cortisol can stay low and then rise in the morning. But with a lot of people, we really want to reserve cortisol for when we need it. First thing in the morning and in a high stress scenario. We don't want to be pumping out cortisol just to keep our blood sugar consistent. Does that make sense? Perfect.
What are people stressing?
Cortisol is produced by stress, is what we talked about last week, right?
Yes. I do believe there's a connection.
When you're stressed, you kick out more cortisol.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that happens is that sugar is a drug. Sugar, the brain responds to sugar just like it does cocaine and other drugs. And so it's part of that self-medication, that instant pleasure response, where I'm stressed, I'm not feeling good, this is uncomfortable, I want to get a quick pleasure fix. And so it becomes a very easy way to avoid a problem and kind of feel better even if the problem's still there. But yes, there is an intimate connection between sugar and cortisol. So that may be part of that cycle of just pumping out cortisol to even deal with that stressful response. Maybe it's just trying to get that extra energy. Okay, so now take a moment. Actually, let's just maybe talk about what are some elements that, how does this relate to the last week? We've talked about that a little bit, but maybe a couple points to really hammer it home. Nutrition and stress. So what are some of the things that we've been discussing as far as how they relate? Just talked about one, Chris. So it could be stress eating. So your eating habits.
Reduce stress and whatnot, comfort food.
Mm-hmm.
I've always noticed that the better I eat, the happier I am, the more level-headed I am, the easier it is to like work things out in my head. Everyone has like those weeks where you just kind of almost burn down the fast food, and your brain doesn't work right.
Oh yeah.
You're not in a good mood. You're not sleeping right.
Right.
Things like that.
And that increases stress, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it's just an absolute domino effect.
Yeah. So it does go both ways. Sometimes you're stressed, so you eat poorly. Sometimes you eat poorly, and that causes more stress. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're just feeding the beast. This is what I always call it. Feeding the beast by continuing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The beast, is in control then when that happens.
And it's not always food, it could be drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Just poor things going into the body in general. It could be other things. Yeah. A lot of times when we're stressed, we make poor decisions for our health. Across the board, that's a lot of times what happens. And that's why stress is so.
That could be sugary drinks or alcoholic drinks. Share both.
Yeah. Or someone's stressed and their energy is low, they reach for the energy drink. That was one of the main changes I made with one of my patients, and his blood test came back much, much better in just a few months, just from cutting out the sugary drinks. He was getting per drink, it was at least 50 to 70 grams of sugar in that drink. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was.
She does it for the energy type of thing. I said, that's horrible. She's
Yeah.
drinking like 2 or 4 a day. I'm like, you don't need kind of red light, it's an issue. It's going to be an issue for you if you keep it up.
Especially sugar.
Bike rides, I used to, for the bike ride, I'd have like Red Bull or 5 hour ride. And then on the bike ride, I'd stop along the way and I would eat the food packets that had caffeine and all that. And then I would strip it all away, and now on the bike rides I'll have apricots, dried apricots, and I'll occasionally have some like chocolate covered coffee. So I'm getting electrolytes, sugars from the apricots, I'm getting a little bit of caffeine, sugar, but it's not all the overly processed stuff you can't pronounce.
Yeah. You're getting nutrients too. Coffee beans have a lot of antioxidants.
And then I was more of a sustained burn. I wasn't having
Yeah.
peaks of that.
Yeah, those goo packets and the energy drinks and the pre-drinks, when it comes to athletic performance, there is a lot of debate there. But when it comes to training, if you're doing really long distances, you want to have something to sustain you. But the more you can train without doing that before and during, the more you actually train your body to use fat instead of relying on the sugar. If you're doing a 100-mile through the mountains, obviously you'll want to sustain with something at some point.
Yeah, and now it's stopping and eating on a ride is a lot less frequent. And the stuff I have a lot of different choices on that. I'll bring like the Epic bars, which are bison, cranberry, walnut bar, and it's got a lot of protein. And those are the three ingredients in it. And then some of the kind bars are good. Those are
I do like this one.
mostly nuts and maybe chocolate, sea salt.
Right.
But yeah, complete flip from, when I was younger, it was literally on the way to go to biking at South Mountain, and it was yoo-hoo and twins. All right, till the shirt wears off, and then we're done. Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that sometimes people run into is well, I'm exercising so I can eat whatever the heck I want. And it doesn't always work out that way. And a lot of people do notice, it sounds like you've noticed this, performance changes when you change the quality and how you're getting those nutrients in there. Yeah, there are performance changes.
Yeah, now if I know I have a difficult ride tomorrow morning, spaghetti squash, roumaine, turkey, meat sauce or whatever, will pay off huge tomorrow. If I eat it tonight, tomorrow versus if I ate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the benefit of
I
getting.
kind of kept track of it.
Yeah.
I had it on
That's great.
the phone before this one. And I had a really good ride with the helmet on. Sometimes it would be like, it wasn't that, it was just something else that day. You could definitely see a difference when I was eating clean.
Yeah.
The shakes throughout the week, heavy shakes.
And that's one of the major benefits of documentation and keeping track of your healthy habits is that you start to see these things where it may have been tough if you weren't keeping track of it. But now with that awareness, you can get information out of it, you can learn about yourself and how your body responds, and then these decisions become easier because you know how you're going to feel afterwards. And that's maybe one of the most important things that people lose when they start to go unhealthy, or if they've been unhealthy for a long time, they lose that feedback. They don't even know how bad they feel when they eat because they just feel bad all the time. And so they don't know the difference of, they don't know that their diet plays a major role, and that sleep plays a major role in exercise. And that's one of the most destructive things. And as you get healthy, you really begin to get fine-tuned on what's good for me and what isn't. Awesome. So now let's talk about some easy nutrition tips. Now, at the end of the day, your own nutrition will be dependent on you. And so we can't really get down to specifics. The other thing is that you will see a lot of different stuff out there. There are some people that, really low fat, which I don't believe in, but on the other side, really high fat. Anyone hear the ketogenic diet? Nobody. Ketogenic diet, very briefly, it's been used for a long time to treat seizures in children, very well actually. And so this is it may have been one of the first accepted diets of its kind, almost like a fad diet, but it's been so useful that it stuck around. Now this is something where actually some athletes are using this as well, and they say that they maintain better focus, better performance, better energy. Now other people crash on it, because generally when it comes to athletic performance, if you want to increase how much you're performing, if you're doing a lot of endurance stuff, working out for a long time, you want to increase your carbohydrates, especially your complex carbohydrates to get in that fuel. And so we have both sides of the spectrum. And so there's a vast amount. So we're going to keep it simple, and with the understanding that it's going to change by person. But for people who are really sick, it's good to have the basics down. The basics will get you a long way. But if you want optimal performance, obviously you got to know where your body's at. I think this is a great quote, and I think we'll probably all agree on this. The food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form, poison. It does feel that way, doesn't it, sometimes? Okay, a few things about nutrition. Food we eat contains energy in the form of calories. We have some calculations on what makes a calorie on the bottom. The calories are broken down into the building blocks that the body uses for fuel. It can use this energy for regeneration and for production of whether it's hormones or other components in the body. Protein is broken down to its amino acid building blocks. Body takes those in, it uses those to make other proteins. It uses those to make neurotransmitters and really a whole host of other chemicals in the body. Proteins are very widely used in the body. Carbohydrates, whether they're complex or simple, they're broken down to sugars before they get into your body. How long it takes for this process, that helps to determine what's going to happen to your blood sugar. But they're all going to be broken down to sugar, mostly glucose. And then we have fat. Most of the dietary lipids incorporate a lot of fatty substances. The triglycerides are about 95% of the lipids that you eat. When it comes to triglycerides, those are broken down to fatty acids. Fatty acids are your saturated fats, your unsaturated fats, your omega-3s. Those are all types of fatty acids. Now, when it comes to calories, carbohydrates and proteins, for every gram you eat, you get 4 calories. Fat, for every gram, it produces 9 calories. So you actually get more energy out of fats per weight. When it comes to fuel usage, the amino acids and proteins are the less preferred source of fuel. Our body wants to use those for enzymes and proteins and things that function. Glucose is preferred by the brain, especially. 70% of the glucose that's used in your body is used by the brain. Yeah. So keeping that blood sugar consistent is a big part of keeping your mental capacities consistent.
If you eat, I mean, a lot of things trick your body to where your body says, oh, I haven't seen this for a while, so I need to store this. If you eat a lot of fat right into your body, say, I'm seeing a bunch of fat, I don't need to store it.
It does. Yeah, when you eat fat, it actually slows down the amount of fat that's stored. It increases the amount that's broken down. That's one of the biochemical processes in your body. That's why the don't eat fat is so unfortunate, because we know biochemistry. It does decrease the amount of fat that you store. Just basically, the way I think of it is exactly what you said. The body doesn't see it, it wants to store it. If it sees it, it knows it's getting it, and so now it's going to break it down, because it knows it has enough of it. Absolutely. Now, when it comes to weight and weight loss and weight gain, it's not just a calorie in, calorie out equation. It kind of is, but it's more complex than that. And we talked about a lot of the other factors that go into it. Hormone levels, especially thyroid hormone, cortisol hormones. There's a lot of things that go into how much energy you're going to burn and how much you're going to store in the form of glycogen for glucose or triglycerides for fat. And so it's really the quality of what you eat. So we're going to go into that now, because it can get difficult for some people who say, I'm just eating air sandwiches and I'm still gaining weight. What's happening? A lot of it is the quality of what they're eating. Yeah, that's definitely empty calories. So a lot of questions that we get, and unfortunately we don't have hard, fast answers, but how many meals per day? What do you guys think?
4.
4 meals per day. What's the timing of the meals that you usually like?
I usually eat something within 30 minutes of getting out. I'll drink a bunch of water. Within 30 minutes, and then up to every 2 hours.
Okay. So about four meals.
And I try to stop eating at least 1 hour before I go to sleep.
Okay. Right. Now, do you have some meals are bigger than others?
I used to really focus on splitting up so they were equal, but at this point it's usually the morning is usually something small.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty common. Some people even have issues eating in the morning. Some people get nauseous. They can force the food down. So for some people, their digestive systems, it takes time to really ramp up. And so bigger meals at the end of the day is pretty common. So some people will say 4, some will say as high as 6 small meals throughout the day. Others actually are proponents of intermittent fasting, that you want to have periods of time when you sleep and then even the beginning of the day where you're in a fasting state and your body, because there are some physiological changes that happen in the body where your body starts to switch over and use other resources. Now, again, this gets into depends on your body, try different things, see how you feel. Because I can see there's definitely benefits to both. When is it best to eat? And so we have heard, there's been a lot of talk about breakfast is the most important meal, right? I'm sure you've heard that at some point. For some people, it's not. For some people, breakfast is a very painful situation. They have a hard time eating. For them, it's important if they eat, to eat the right quality. And so when you eat and what you eat are very important. But I do agree that before bed, you definitely don't want to have a heavy meal. Some people say to stop eating as early as 7 or 6 or 5 in the late afternoon and evening. Give your time to digest.
Try to eat before I'm hungry, just like drink before you're thirsty kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that you don't just eat beyond what you actually need, and then by the time your body tells you you're full, you're overfull.
Right. We're going to get into the type of eaters, and one of them is that type of eater where they go so long where by the time they're eating, they're famished. And so the eyes are now gigantic but because the brain is saying, I need food, and then they eat more than what they need. And, it's kind of like the adage, don't go shopping when you're hungry. If you're eating before you're hungry, you're drinking before you're thirsty, you'll have better portion control. That's really smart. Start to eat with consciousness and direction rather than just because your reptilian brain is saying, just get calories and we need some food. Yeah, because then, and actually I experienced this yesterday. I was in a meeting, ran about an hour and a half late. I ate later than I wanted to. And the rest of the day, it was a mental battle of sticking with healthy choices because that part of my brain was on just like, sugar, 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 let's get in more fuel, just because I was a little bit behind on my schedule. What food combinations are best? This is one, we're not going to touch on this one, but yeah, some people say don't eat fruit with anything. There's don't eat fats with carbohydrates. There's all different types of combination theories, and some of them are based on empirical evidence. Some are based on biochemistry. This one I keep open to people because I don't think people are necessarily getting sick because of the combinations of foods. I think they're getting sick because of the foods that they're eating in general. If you're eating a bunch of sugars and you're drinking sugary drinks, I don't care what else you're eating with it, it's not a good thing for you. This gets into how do you get increased performance, and I think that's a personal thing. But there is a lot out there with food combinations. And what should I do while I eat? Any thoughts on this?
Run on a treadmill.
What's that?
Run on a treadmill.
Run on a treadmill, yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing, right? Ideally, that is what's happening. Ideally, the perfect world, you are present with your food. You're smelling it, you're looking at it, you're tasting it, you're present in that response. When the brain is aware of it, the brain, I would imagine, I don't have any science to back this up, but I imagine it's more prepared and it knows how to deal with all the nutrients that are coming in. We do taste and smell for a reason, and I think the awareness helps that. But it is known that taste and smell helps us identify what is going into our mouth. And if we're aware of that, I think it helps that process. But the main thing is, the more relaxed you are, the more blood flow you're going to get to your organs, and the better your pancreas is going to work and the other digestive organs. And so you're going to basically digest better. So definitely the more relaxed. You don't want to be running on a treadmill. You don't want to be stressing out. You want to give yourself that time. Of course, life gets in the way, but it's something to at least maybe one meal a day. For people that are always on the run, maybe their work dictates that to some degree. Take one meal a day where that you're taking time and just being present with your food. Okay, very quickly, say no to fad diets. There are new diets out there. Not all of them are fads, but really look at them with a discerning eye. Is it very calorie deficient? If so, what is that going to do to your hormone levels? What is your body going to do in that state? It's probably going to slow down your metabolism because you don't have enough calories to sustain it. Does it have huge skews in the macronutrient content? Sometimes that's with a ketogenic diet that can help some people, but it also can be detrimental to other people. And what is their focus on? Are they focusing on whole foods, or is it focused on buy these processed things that we make? And then don't worry about what you're eating. Just add these columns up or whatever some of the scenarios are. And sometimes those work for people, but I think with fad diets, sometimes they get into the let's do it more faster. Add these other things. We can lose 30 pounds in 2 weeks. That is not sustainable. And those people tend to gain the weight back quickly, and they gain more than what they lost because the body went through changes. A lot of times their metabolism is slower, so now it's even harder to keep the weight off because they're just not burning as much. And it doesn't reinforce healthy habits that are sustainable over time. And so the main thing is to remember, it is a marathon, not a race. It's a lifestyle thing. It's better to make sustainable, small changes that build up over time than to make a whole bunch at once. And they say you can cook a toad without jumping out if you heat it up very slowly, which is a weird thing to think about. But the idea is if you make slow changes, yeah, it's a strange analogy, but if you make slow changes, you don't even know they're happening. And that's the main thing. You want it to be sustainable, and it should be also something that isn't also a huge burden on your life. The rule of thumb is 1 to 2 pounds per week is a very good sustainable rate of weight loss. People who have more weight, sometimes they can lose more at first, but 1 to 2 pounds is a good thing to shoot for. Some people get frustrated with that, and that's because all the commercials are telling them lose 10 pounds in the first week, and it's just that's not useful. So what is a healthy diet? Basically, high in vitamins and minerals, low in processing and additives. A lot of processing gets rid of vitamins and minerals. It gets rid of fibers. You don't want that. You want all of them in there. And if it has extra stuff in there, that's just more junk floating around in your body. A balance of macronutrients. Those are your sugars, your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. That balance is different for different people, but just being aware of that balance and what is good for you. A common one is the 40-30-30 split. 40% of calories from carbs, 30% from protein, 30% from fat. That's a general one, but it goes as high as the ketogenic is 80% fat, 15 protein, 5 carbs, and for high endurance athletes, they're going to get as much as 70% from carbs. And so there's a lot of fluctuation between. But for general patients, we usually start with 40-30-30. 40% carbs, 30 fats, 30 proteins. And we'll talk about what type, because the type is important. High in fiber. Not too much, especially if you have GI issues like colitis or diverticulitis. You don't want too much fiber, but more than the average person is getting in their SAD diet. What type of macronutrient is fiber? Carbs, protein, or fat? It's a carb. It's a carb. It's a good carb. So those are good carbs. So not all carbs are bad. The fiber is a long carbohydrate that we cannot break down. We don't have the enzymes for it. Whereas starches are long carbohydrates that we do have the enzyme for. And so we turn them into sugars. But the fibers, they just pass right through. Yeah. Nature's Brillo pad. As fresh as possible. Perfect world, you go out into your backyard, you pick it out of the ground, you clean it off, you throw it in a bowl and you eat it. Perfect world. Doesn't always happen that way. In general, it doesn't happen that way. But if you're getting it from, I like things like farmer's market. I like things like fresh produce. If you're getting it, some things are good to get frozen, especially if they're frozen right away. It can help retain the nutrients. Canned is generally not a good option. It's sitting it's not good for the food in general. but as fresh as possible. But whatever gets those nutrients in, I also like frozen, especially things like berries. Berries can spoil very quickly, and it can be very frustrating. You're going to be going to the market, a couple times a week minimum. I like to freeze my berries, and that way I put them in smoothies anyway, and so they're like they help make it cold anyway. All in moderation. All in moderation. At the very least, if you're eating consistently, you're eating before you're hungry, you're making good, moderate choices. You're not getting swept away in these fad diets that want you to eat 500 calories worth of food. There's a lot of good things that come just from that, from just having good, moderate portion sizes and also your macronutrient intake. And also variety. I would say variety too. Get different things in. And lastly, tasty. Healthy food should not be a punishment. It's a lifestyle, and it could be fun, and it should be fun, and it should be tasty.
The farmer's market in Gilbert, we went to, there's a farmer there, and there's a booth there. This company that will do a box of produce for you. You pre-order it, and every week you can either swing in and pick it up, or you can, for a little bit more, they'll deliver it to you. But
Yeah.
it's kind of, it'll have the main things you always ask for, and then it'll have some different stuff depending on what's right at that time of year.
Yeah.
And
A lot of farms are doing this now.
And it was less expensive than if you went and bought all the stuff at Sprouts or Whole Foods. And then it forces you open it up and you're like, what the hell is this? And then you look it up and you're like, look up a recipe for some weird kind of squash you've never seen, and then you realize that it's awesome.
Yeah.
And it, like you said, that all of a sudden it's kind of fun. You're like, all right, what is this
Yeah.
thing? How do you cook it? How do you eat it?
$20, you can get a large amount from a lot of these places.
Yeah.
$20, and you can feed yourself and at least one other person with these veggies.
When my wife changed to, they basically stripped away everything she was eating and slowly. She's been working at reintroducing things that she can eat. It has to be gluten-free, dairy-free. She's trying to be completely grain-free. So we were fortunate, and I didn't want to be sitting there eating junk. She can't.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'm in. At least when I'm at home, I'm in on whatever you're in. And so she'll usually go and buy a bunch of stuff. We haven't done the subscribe to the delivery of the box, but I want to try that. So
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. You can look up CSA's, Community Supported Agriculture. And yeah, that's the model. Is you get a subscription. It's usually a certain amount of weeks. And some places, actually, back in New York, there's one that the way you pay for it was to work the farm. And that's pretty cool. And so you work the farm and you get food out of it. But others, it's usually a weekly thing. I've seen as low as $10. $20 is pretty average. And you get a box of stuff. And sometimes they deliver it too. And they actually have different things where some will actually give you for specific meals, or they give you meal plans or recipes. So there's some really cool stuff. And I have seen them at Farmers Market. I go to the Awatuki and I've seen it there too. So that's a great way to get a lot of veggies, produce for cheap, and also some ones that kind of force you out of your comfort zone from just your, lettuce, celery, carrot, like kind of the main ones.
But it's super easy to get stuck in a rut buying the same thing every week.
Yeah. And then, and a lot of people that I see, they end up in the salad routine. All they do is eat salads. But there's much more to eating healthy than salads. And it should be tasty. It should be something to look forward to. Now, we're not going to have time to do this, but there is a handout on your eating style. I encourage you to do it. It's 20 questions, and you tally up the numbers, and you get what eating style you are. And so some of the ones that they have are, they have the meal skipper, the nighttime nosher, the convenience consumer, the fruitless feaster, the heavy portioner, the steady snacker, and the swing dieter. And then they have a little bit of a description of what that is, and then also some fixes, some ways, some strategies for those types of eaters to eat healthy. So I definitely encourage you to do that. At the very least, it's a fun exercise, and it shows us our tendencies. None of us are perfect, and the more we know about ourselves and our tendencies, the more we can help traverse those when they come up. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes. So we talked about a little bit about quantity, not too much. A lot of the quantity sorts itself out. And actually, if you're eating healthy foods, your brain will reset to a point where that you have better portion control. If you have good timing and you're eating good quality. When you get on that sugary carb roller coaster, that's when the portion goes out of control and the cravings increase. And so a lot of the quantity becomes common sense and not as important, in my opinion. But let's talk about quality. What you get is very important. It changes the content of, especially if it's an animal, it's going to change the content of the animal. They did a study on fat content in cows that were fed grains versus grass. And they found that the ones that were fed grass, which is their normal diet, they had a higher ratio of omega-3s than those that had grains. They had more omega-6s. And the omega-6s are more pro-inflammatory than the 3s. And so just by their diet, and I would imagine how they're raised, their lifestyle, how much activity they're getting, if they're getting pumped full of hormones and antibiotics, that's going to change the actual content of the food. And so, and then when you go into veggies and fruits, what's been sprayed on it, what's been put in the soil on it, there's a lot of other nasty stuff that's there. Because you have these things that kill insects, and while they may not necessarily kill us, I'm hard-pressed to say that it's actually good for us.
Yeah.
So suggested for beef. For all these things, you're going to see organic. Organic is really good. Now, we're going to see that if you can't do organic everything, there is a list of things that you want to choose. But any meat or dairy product, I would say organic. Because who knows what they're eating. And the higher up you get in the food chain, the unhealthier it gets if it's having unhealthy foods. It's called bioaccumulation. It just starts to add more and more junk in the body. And so anything meat related, get organic. And that encompasses a lot of other things. But beef, organic, grass-fed, no hormones or RBST, no antibiotics, and then optional, you can go for lean cuts. But if you're getting a quality meat, I think the fats in there will be quality as well. And I don't think they're something to be afraid of.
Do you know, this week, do you know if there's a difference between the grass fed and the grain fed in like the uric acid content? Because I know red meat causes gout because
Yeah.
of the uric acid in it. And,
Yeah.
It doesn't really run in my family, but my uncle has it all the time.
I would say no. I would say no. I would imagine no, but I don't know. I don't know for sure. Good question, though. Yeah.
Give him a, here, do this kind of thing, and maybe you can get that some those.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to look that up because I've never even considered that. But yeah. Good question. Poultry, any chicken product, again, organic, free range or cage free. We had a picture on one of our slides that, what does this actually mean? Free range is just, on this bountiful prairie and it's got all this space. Not necessarily. It just has some space to go outside and some space. And cage free, it might be out of a cage, but there's still going to be packed full of chickens. The idea is, with your dollar, voting for better conditions for animals, because if they're stressed out and they're not healthy, how are they going to be healthy to eat? And so that's kind of, even if it may not be perfect, it's moving at least in the right direction. That's at least my opinion. No antibiotics again. Optional vegetarian feed. Don't know what type of vegetarian feed they're getting, but at least it's better than them having other non-vegetarian feed, which isn't going to be good for them. And then certified humane. There's a seal you can see that certifies certain products as humanely raised, which I think that's another good thing to do. If you have a healthy, happy animal that you're eating, I think that's going to lead to better components within its meat product. Pork, so if you're eating pork, suggested organic, no fillers, no antibiotics, no hormones. Optional, you could do no nitrates, but a lot of things have nitrates. The important thing with a no nitrate alternative is they'll put in celery seed a lot of times, because a lot of vegetables have nitrates. Very quickly, the problem with nitrates is when they turn to nitrites. That's when, and that happens in the gut, and those become cancerous. There's hundreds. When you have vitamin C, though, which is why you see a lot of them are buffeted with vitamin C, it will stop the production of nitrates to nitrites. And so basically the story is nitrates are not a terrible thing. We get them in healthy foods. It's more about if they're in isolation without other things, which generally they are. That's when it becomes a problem. But if you want to go for the more food-based source of the nitrates, which are going to help keep it from changing color, you're going to see a lot of times the celery seed. Now, if you like pork-type products, but you don't want to get pork, I've known some butchers to say it's the most disgusting, dirtiest animal, and they won't eat it. But there are things like turkey sausage, chicken sausage, there's other alternatives. Fish, this is going to be different for all species. Some of the concerns about fish. Farm-raised versus wild-caught. Wild-caught all the way. Farm-raised, again, the conditions are worse. They can be by farms, where now you get runoff of pesticides, and you can even tell the color of like salmon, farm-raised versus wild-caught salmon. The color of the meat is different. And I've even heard, and I don't know how true this is. You can tell the color difference, but I've heard that they actually have to color the meat to make it look somewhat normal, and that's wow. Now, another concern is the heavy metal content, especially mercury levels. Again, the bigger fish are going to tend to have higher levels because of bioaccumulation. Smaller ones tend to be better. There are certain resources. The NRDC has a sustainable seafood guide, and you can get Seafood Watch and Safe Seafood. Those are two apps where you can look at, and they have different things like heavy metal content, populations worldwide, and basically, so how healthy is it for you to eat, but also are they endangered? Is this something that's being overfished? So they even talk about fishing practices, which I think is good to know, because we have to make sure that when we leave this planet that there's a planet left for the people that come after us. Eggs, organic, free range or cage free again, no antibiotics. You can also get the extra omegas. That's a good bonus. They'll have the omega-3 extra. Grains, organic, whole grain, gluten-free can be really good. The gluten-free grains are actually getting better and better quality. If you don't want to go full gluten-free, I would say definitely whole grain. You might want to do something like an Ezekiel sprouted bread. That's kind of a step in the direction of going gluten-free. But Udi's is a pretty good brand. They have some really good gluten-free products. And when it comes to other grains, things like rice, quinoa, quinoa is not a grain, but it kind of functions as one. There's a lot of gluten-free grains and good flours for baking.
Over the last 3 years, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be where any gluten-free grain product is going to crumble in your hand. It's gotten better and better, and some of the wraps, and there was a wrap, and there was also a pizza crust, gluten-free pizza crust. They've been able to maintain their form a lot better. Yeah, especially in the past few years, it's phenomenal.
Quinoa and chia seed tortilla chips.
Mm.
Basically, they're amazing. It doesn't have celiac, and she eats those in style.
Yeah.
She's like, she actually said, she's like, this makes me feel like old.
Yeah.
She was eating those and chicken and salsa.
Yeah, it's getting easier and easier. And some people are sensitive, some people aren't. And some people we don't know, but they feel better. And the fact that there's options, I think, is a good thing. And sometimes it's good to try because maybe you're not celiac, but you might be sensitive to it. And there's other reasons for why gluten could be an increasing problem. And some of it may be glyphosate, which is a pesticide. And some of it may be also the type of yeast that's used. It used to be the mother yeast, which was related to that type of flour or dough. And now it'll be kind of it could be a stock yeast. And so it may not be breaking down the gluten as much. And so we may have higher content. So there's a lot of theories out there. But for some people, they just like to avoid it, or at least keep it to a minimum. For dairy, any milk, cheese, or yogurt. Some people don't know what dairy is. So milk, cheese, yogurt, those are 3 common sources. Same thing as with the cows, basically. No hormones, no antibiotics, organic, from grass-fed. Some people like raw, too. Now, if you don't want to do dairy, some people just don't tolerate dairy no matter how healthy it is. A lot of non-dairy alternatives. Almond milk, soy milk, rice milk, hemp milk, cashew milk, coconut milk. There's all sorts of types. And actually, my sandwich today had some almond mozzarella cheese. It's very tasty. Yeah. And at Sprouts, they also have an almond cheese pepper jack cheese, which I've had that one too. It's pretty delicious. Cashew cheese you can make very easily at home. Yeah.
Make, lasagna.
Lasagna.
The ricotta that's in it is
Yeah.
and I would bet money that you could have it.
Yes, I agree.
So freaking good.
Dr. Jackie makes one that I want her to make for my family.
No, make it, take the raw cashews and soak them, and there's a process to it, but for,
You said it's pretty easy to make them.
yeah, almond milk, but, we made, for Thanksgiving, we made 2 big pans of lasagna. One just to freeze, so I could bring it to work for lunch. But the other one, I mean, it's turned out so good. And instead of noodles, we're slicing zucchini thin and using them
Oh yeah.
instead of pasta.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Now I want to make one.
You can do like a quinoa-based noodle if you want to do that, or you can do a veggie. But and what you can do with the meat is you can make the meat out of walnuts. Soak the walnuts, kind of almost a similar process as the cashews. You soak the walnuts, season it, and it makes a very good meat alternative. So now you have 2 nut-based for your meat and your cheese. Now I would bet that, I want my family to try it. I have an Italian family. I would love them to try it. They would know something was up there, but they would never guess it wasn't meat and cheese. Yeah.
Check them.
There's
Very interesting.
not to get us off track, but there's the process where we sliced all the zucchini and then layering it with spinach, artichoke, there's cashew cheese, and then it's just like that. It's like fluffing together. It's so good.
Yeah, that's going to be on my list
That's
coming soon.
Yeah.
So there's ways to eat healthy and eat very well. And the more people get into healthy eating, the more these recipes are out there.
So you go to Costco or something and buy your own and
They finally have raw organic at Costco for
I've seen them in bigger bags.
Mary, I think they're Mariani's is the name, but almonds, walnuts, cashews, and whatever. Sometimes they don't have all of them, but when they get them, we'll throw them in the freezer.
That's the only Costco that insists people do have to buy those.
That's where the freezer comes in handy.
Yeah, you say you go to Whole Foods a lot. I just don't go that much.
Sprouts
You're
and
right,
Whole
it comes at a
Yeah.
cost.
Sprouts and Trader Joe's, for me the first step is the farmer's market. I like to support the local farmers. I know it didn't travel too far to get to me. And sometimes you get really good deals, especially when things are in season. Then it's the Sprouts or Trader Joe's, and then the last one to kind of fill in the gaps is Whole Foods, or if I'm in a pinch, I want to go to Hot Bar. But yeah, usually Whole Foods is my last step, because otherwise it gets to be pretty expensive. Sprouts is good and Trader Joe's of keeping their prices at least comparable and competitive with other supermarkets. So one of the handouts has everything we talked about with the different types of foods. It also has your Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are the ones where if you, the bare minimum, get these 12 foods organic. They have been measured to be the most pesticide-laden foods. They measure what's actually in the foods. And washing them doesn't get to it because it goes into the food. And so you can wash the surface, great, but there's stuff up to an inch in where you have pesticides. Even vegetable soaks, I would guess that it's not getting them out. So those are the ones who want organic. The Clean 15, they have the lowest amount of measured pesticides in them. A lot of times they have some sort of skin around them, something that keeps those things out, or other times it just doesn't absorb it much. And then in the middle, we have some of the best fish to eat, middle, and then the worst fish to eat. So that's all in the handout. And this is could be a very helpful guide for what to buy and to kind of simplify this whole process. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all the same information, right? So food sensitivities, this is one where healthy food for one person isn't healthy food for everyone. And so if there are still issues, there are 2 ways to identify food sensitivities. One way is an elimination diet. Take out the most common allergens, and then you slowly put them back in after usually you want to avoid them for at least 6 weeks. Slowly put them back in to see if you react to it, or you get a blood test. Those are the two ways. A blood test is good because in an elimination diet, you're not going to take out things like watermelon and lettuce. And those are two things that when I got my blood test done, I had antibodies to those, so I was allergic to those. And so it can pick up those uncommon sensitivities.
What are the problems people have with soy?
So there's a lot of different potential problems and theories. So one is that a lot of soy is GMO. And so you're changing the food, it's going to change the body's response to it. And we're still learning out what that is. Another one is especially in females, soy is estrogen mimicking. And so it can throw off, especially different parts of the cycles, it can throw off the hormone balance and how much estrogen dominance they have. Those are two of the major issues.
Is it true that corn didn't really exist as we know it now before it was modified? Like it didn't grow here and here like what we see now?
Yeah, I think from what I understand, it was more like maize. And maize is much different than the corn that we know it to be. But also corn, most corn is GMO. And especially since it's wind pollinates it. And so even if you have a non-GMO farm, if there's a GMO farm next to it, then it's going to contaminate, and then there's some legal battles where now they're like, well, you took our GMO crops and you didn't pay for them, and so now the people who just got the wind blow, now they're getting sued by Monsanto. It's it's a disaster. Yeah, so corn is one of those things where some people, they take out corn, and corn is in a lot of things, but on the one hand, you want to think it's healthy, but in a lot of cases it's not. And so for some people, they take out corn, and that makes a big difference in their health. Corn and soy are two of the top ones. But your 6 most common sensitivities: dairy, gluten, and wheat. Corn is up there, nuts, soy, and also in eggs as well. Common ones, but it changes from person to person. And so that's where just knowing your body. So very quickly, some ideas on implementing a healthy diet. Just a basic plate for people who are completely lost. Again, I might be preaching to the choir right now, but for people who are completely lost, you can start with a meat, fish, poultry, or some sort of even vegetable-based protein. We have potato, rice, pasta, some sort of carbohydrate, and then vegetables. Again, when you're in the carbohydrate, you want something whole grain. Now, for the vegetables, I think this can get even much bigger. And especially for people who want to lose weight, they want to decrease the carbohydrate portion, they want to increase the vegetable portion, increase the protein portion. So there's a lot of variety. But I think if people had good portion sizes, they ate throughout the day, before they got hungry, and they weren't binging on unhealthy choices, this would get a lot of people healthy. And that should be 1 part meat, 1 part grain or starch, and 2 parts vegetable. Just a very basic place to start if you don't know where to start. Now we're running out of time, so basically just consider some of the pitfalls for you individually that get in the way. Is it time? Do you run out of time to, you're busy at work, and so you go out and you get food, fast food. There's some strategies for that, or for cooking. You can't cook every day. Sometimes a really good strategy is to make bigger meals on a weekend day or on a day when you're less busy and plan out for the week. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I had my salad in a jar. You put the dressing on the bottom. You put your hard veggies and nuts and seeds on that will be resistant to getting soggy from the dressing. And then you put your greens on the very top. When you're ready to eat it, shake it up, get your fork, and then you're ready to go. And you can make these in a few days in a row. That way you're not making lunch every single day. And so there's a lot of these strategies to decrease the time it takes, where now you're actually saving time instead of having to go out and get food every single time. You have it all ready. But I am a big proponent of making big batches beginning of the week, something that could be a couple meals. And if you make a meal one day, it could be lunch the next day for leftovers. And so you're making multiple meals at once. It just makes sense. Otherwise, you're cooking all the time. Money, if you do it intelligently, you can actually save money in the process. Eating out is really expensive. And then one of the expensive things is when you eat out. We tend to, when we purchase things, sometimes we cheat a little bit. It's like, oh, I'll get that dessert. Oh, I'll get that drink. Why not? If you go shopping once or twice a week, you may cheat once or twice a week, not every single meal. And so the amount of times that you can cheat actually go down. And so you make healthier choices. If you're eating out every single meal, the money tends to slip away. Taste. If your healthy food does not taste good, you're doing it wrong. There are recipes, nutritionists, there are people who go to make a good meal plan. It should taste good. Running out of options, again, you're doing it wrong. You can get a CSA where you're forced to actually cook with other foods, or you just challenge yourself to try a new veggie each week. Try a new recipe each week. You'll over time build your options. And then with work, again, there are options to bring the food with you. One thing is, if you make your own protein bar snack, you have something where if you're on the go, you have those ready to go. And they can last a while too. I mean, if you store them correctly, especially. But these are things where if you come prepared, you have much less chance to make bad decisions. You'll make better decisions. Okay. So take just 1 minute to think of a goal to set for this week for eating, especially diet and nutrition, but it could also be on stress management, since we talked about it last week. Something that will help you for your end goal. Okay, excellent. Let's see, set your goal. So to summarize, talked about diabetes, obesity, how much they're connected, and also how much it connects to last week in heart disease. Nutrition is the foundation, not only of staying healthy and away from those diseases, but also in general. Staying away from diseases, but also functioning optimally. Things like energy level, concentration, brain, focus, it affects all aspects of our life. And really, diet can be very simple, but it's also very individual. And it's always a process. And if you make healthy choices each day, it becomes easier and easier to make healthy choices. Now, looking at next week, so first, some of the resources we have. On top of what type of eater you have, what type of eater are you? I think that's a great one to do. Because the other resources, we have top 5 diabetes healing superfoods. So things that will naturally balance blood sugar and also sensitize you to insulin. And just 5 of many, actually. The helpful shopping guides, which we showed, the Dirty Dozen Clean 15, the Healthy Fish Guide, and the other meats and produce. Common food terms, what do things like organic mean? What does free range mean? And this is according to their definitions by the USDA or FDA. Do they mean anything? And if they do, what does it mean? Because there's a lot of terms out there, and sometimes they're used loosely. And then there's a little metabolism infographic on how to keep your metabolism high, because that's something that we all want. We want high metabolism, so we have energy, and so that we don't gain weight. Looking forward to next week. Next week we're going to talk about pain, inflammation, and exercise. Pain is very prevalent. We've all experienced it to some degree. A lot of our pain is linked to inflammation. Inflammation is also a major factor in a lot of diseases, so we're going to be covering all sorts of things in the process of talking about inflammation. And then with exercise, how does it help with pain and inflammation? But also, how do you exercise when you're in pain? Because if you're in pain and you exercise, you can actually cause more damage. And it can be very difficult too. So we'll talk about how to make that work in the process. Any questions? Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Nutritional timing, is that the name of it?
Yeah,